Before we begin, viewer discretion is advised. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. The following is based on verified federal courtroom testimony as reported by Inner City Press. We're now on day 10 of the Diddy trial, inside a packed Manhattan courtroom that has become the epicenter of one of the biggest scandals in music history. Something no one saw coming happened again. Another celebrity stepped in, and another secret spilled wide open. Millions know Ashton Kutcher as the funny guy, the prankster, the rom-com star, and the tech investor with a clean reputation. But on a heavy spring morning in a Manhattan courtroom, he wasn't any of those things. Ashton Kutcher's transformation from a beloved celebrity to a reluctant witness in the Diddy trial marks a pivotal moment in the ongoing saga. Once known for his charismatic charm and comedic timing, Kutcher found himself thrust into a completely different role, one where the stakes were far higher than any script he had ever written or acted in. In the dimly lit courtroom, surrounded by the weight of legal proceedings, Kutcher was not merely an actor playing a part, he became a figure representing the complexities of fame, friendship, and accountability. The atmosphere shifted palpably as he took the stand, revealing a side of himself that many had never seen before. No longer just a heartthrob or a tech mogul, Kutcher faced the daunting task of navigating the treacherous waters of a high-profile trial while grappling with the implications of his own actions and associations. This dramatic shift in identity would soon unravel layers of truth that had long been hidden beneath the surface of celebrity culture. The moment Ashton Kutcher took the stand, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted dramatically. As he stood there, the familiar image of the goofy heartthrob faded away, replaced by a man burdened with the weight of truth and the gravity of the situation at hand. The prosecutor wasted no time, immediately presenting a blurry screenshot from 2009 that captured Kutcher in a shirt unbuttoned, laughing in a dimly lit room. The image was jarring, evoking memories of wild nights and carefree antics, but it also served as a stark reminder of the darker undercurrents that lay beneath the surface of their friendships. Kutcher's face changed as he recognized the photograph, a mix of discomfort and resolve washing over him. He confirmed it was indeed at Diddy's white party, a gathering that once symbolized fun and camaraderie among celebrities. Yet, as he spoke, the curtain began to fall on the facade of innocence. Kutcher admitted to being friends with Diddy and looking up to him, but then came a line that would resonate throughout the trial: "There are things I saw, things I ignored." This admission marked a turning point, revealing the complexity of their relationship and the unsettling reality of what transpired behind closed doors. As the courtroom absorbed these words, it became clear that Kutcher was not just testifying about a party, he was exposing a web of secrets that could change everything for everyone involved. The air thickened with anticipation as the audience awaited the next revelation, aware that they were witnessing a pivotal moment in the unfolding drama of the Diddy trial. As the questioning continued, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew increasingly tense. Kutcher began to describe the evolution of his relationship with Diddy and others within what he referred to as the Hollywood Rap Pack, which included Danny Masterson and Wilmer Valderrama. Initially, their interactions were characterized by casual gatherings and shared laughter, but as the years progressed, the nature of these meetings transformed. What started as simple parties morphed into more exclusive events, and eventually, they became something altogether different, an insular world governed by rules and expectations that few dared to question. Kutcher recounted how the environment shifted from light-hearted hangouts to what he described as staged environments. These were not mere social gatherings, they were carefully orchestrated affairs where every detail was controlled, and every guest was expected to comply with an unspoken code of conduct. The exclusivity of these events created a sense of privilege, yet it also fostered an atmosphere of secrecy and control. Kutcher emphasized that everything was meticulously planned, from the guest list to the activities, often leaving attendees unaware of what they were truly stepping into. The most alarming aspect of this transformation was the lack of discussion surrounding the changes. Kutcher admitted that he didn't ask enough questions, reflecting on the naivety of his younger self. "I should have," he said quietly, acknowledging the weight of his silence. The implication was clear: the more he participated in these events, the more he became complicit in the system that governed them. As the prosecutor pressed further, Kutcher revealed how these gatherings often featured private rooms, missing phones, and stacks of NDAs waiting at the door, all designed to create an illusion of normalcy while concealing the true nature of the experience. This normalization of such practices left Kutcher feeling trapped in a cycle of compliance, where the thrill of exclusivity overshadowed the potential dangers lurking beneath the surface. As he continued to recount the details, it became evident that the line between enjoyment and exploitation was blurred, and the consequences of his participation were far-reaching. The courtroom listened intently, recognizing that Kutcher was not merely recounting a series of events, he was peeling back the layers of a complex social dynamic that had ensnared many, including himself. With each word, the gravity of the situation deepened, and the audience felt the tension rise as they realized they were witnessing the unraveling of a tightly woven network of influence and power. As the prosecutor pressed play on the recording from the 2013 party, the courtroom fell silent, each person leaning forward in anticipation. The muffled music and laughter filled the air, creating a surreal backdrop for the impending revelations. Then came a voice, clearer than the rest, that belonged to Ashton Kutcher. His words echoed through the room, "I don't think we should be filming this. Seriously, this is too much." The statement hung in the air, laden with significance, as if Kutcher was trying to grasp the gravity of the situation even in that moment. The prosecutor's gaze locked onto Kutcher, prompting a direct question, "Who are you talking about?" The tension in the room escalated as Kutcher paused, his eyes flickering toward the defense table where Diddy sat, stone-faced and composed. Finally, Kutcher spoke, "Guests. Some were models, others weren't, but most of them didn't know what they were walking into." The courtroom erupted with murmurs as the implications of his words sank in. Kutcher elaborated, explaining how these events operated like a well-oiled machine, complete with private rooms, missing phones, and stacks of NDAs waiting at the door, akin to party favors. He continued, detailing how the guests were often oblivious to the true nature of what awaited them. Many signed the NDAs without fully understanding the consequences, believing it to be standard procedure in the industry. At the time, Kutcher thought it was just part of the game, a necessary evil to maintain the facade of exclusivity. However, as he reflected, he realized that he had unwittingly contributed to a culture of silence and complicity. "Even I did multiple times," he admitted, his voice trembling slightly as he acknowledged the weight of his own participation. The impact of these revelations reverberated through the courtroom, shifting the atmosphere from mere curiosity to a profound realization of the systemic issues at play. Kutcher's testimony was no longer just about a single party, it illuminated a broader pattern of behavior that had allowed such practices to flourish under the radar. As the jury processed this information, it became clear that Kutcher was not simply recounting events, he was laying bare the uncomfortable truths that had long been buried beneath layers of glamour and celebrity culture. The tension in the room intensified, as the audience grappled with the implications of his words and the unsettling reality of what had transpired behind closed doors. As Ashton Kutcher continued his testimony, the courtroom absorbed the chilling reality of the agreements he described. The NDAs, once perceived as routine legal formalities, were actually tools of control, mechanisms designed to suppress dissent, silence victims, and obscure the true nature of these exclusive gatherings. Kutcher explained how, at the time, he believed signing these documents was simply part of the process when attending high-profile events. They were presented as standard precautions, assurances that nothing inappropriate would occur and that any footage taken during the night would remain confidential. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, he understood the deeper implications. "At the time, I thought it was standard," he admitted, his voice carrying the weight of regret. "But now I wonder what I signed away without realizing it." The sheer volume of NDAs he had agreed to over the years painted a picture of a system built on compliance rather than transparency. Kutcher recalled how, after entering certain venues, he would often find himself handed a stack of paperwork, sometimes multiple pages long, with little explanation beyond vague assurances that it was just part of the event's security measures. Most guests, eager to gain entry to these elite spaces, signed without hesitation. They wanted to be part of the inner circle, to experience the allure of exclusivity, and so they complied. But in doing so, they unknowingly surrendered their right to speak out if anything went wrong. Kutcher, too, had followed suit. "We signed them anyway because back then, That was normal, he said, his tone tinged with both resignation and self-reproach. Or at least that's what they wanted you to think. The psychological manipulation embedded in these agreements was deliberate. By making the NDAs appear mundane, the organizers ensured that guests never questioned their necessity. The illusion of normalcy allowed the entire system to operate under the guise of privacy and consent, when in reality, it was a means of enforcing silence. Kutcher's realization of this deception was a turning point in his testimony, one that exposed the calculated nature of the events he had once viewed as harmless. The more he spoke, the clearer it became that these gatherings were not just about indulgence or social status, they were about maintaining control, ensuring that any potential scandal remained buried beneath layers of legal language and non-disclosure. And as Kutcher made painfully clear, he had played his part in upholding that system, whether intentionally or not. As the weight of his past actions settled over him, Kutcher's demeanor shifted. Gone was the confident, composed figure who had entered the courtroom with the air of a seasoned performer. Now, he was a man reckoning with the consequences of his silence. His hands trembled slightly as he leaned forward, his voice soft but resolute. "There was a whole part of those parties I didn't see, but I felt it," he said. "And when I did start seeing it, I didn't speak up." The courtroom absorbed his words, the gravity of his admission sinking in like a slow-moving tide. This was no longer just a recollection of past events, it was an acknowledgement of guilt, of complicity, of failure to act when action was needed. Kutcher's confession was not one of blind ignorance but of willful inaction. He had witnessed behaviors that raised red flags, moments that should have prompted concern, yet he chose to look the other way. "That's when the weight of what I was saying really landed," he admitted, his voice steady despite the emotion building within him. The courtroom was no longer filled with spectators of a celebrity scandal, it was a space where truth was being laid bare, and the lines between friend and enabler, participant and protector, were dissolving. Kutcher was not just speaking for himself, he was speaking for a generation of individuals who had benefited from a system that thrived on silence. As he continued, the tension in the room thickened. Kutcher's image as the charming, affable star of rom-coms and tech ventures was unraveling before the eyes of the public. The man who had once been synonymous with wholesome humor and effortless charisma was now standing as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even those who seem to have everything can be entangled in systems far beyond their control. The courtroom was watching, not just for the sake of the trial, but for the deeper message that Kutcher was delivering, that silence in the face of wrongdoing is not neutrality, but complicity. As the trial progressed, the conversation shifted from individual actions to the larger system that had enabled and perpetuated the scandal. Kutcher's testimony painted a picture of a deeply entrenched network of power, money, and influence, one that extended far beyond the walls of Diddy's private parties. It was not just about the celebrities who attended or the events themselves, it was about the financial structures and business dealings that supported and concealed them. "You don't rise in Hollywood without learning when to shut up," Kutcher said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of years of unspoken truths. "I had money coming in, a public image I didn't want to mess up." What Kutcher revealed next sent shockwaves through the courtroom. He spoke of a blacklist, an invisible mechanism used to control access to the inner sanctum of this exclusive world. If someone asked too many questions, pushed too hard, or failed to stay quiet, they were cut off entirely. Their invitations vanished, their opportunities dried up, and their careers suffered quiet but irreversible damage. "If you ask questions, the invites stop coming," Kutcher explained. "If you push too far, you're cut off completely." The message was clear, silence was not just encouraged, it was enforced. The final piece of the puzzle was the name that nobody dared to challenge. "You don't cross Sean Combs," Kutcher said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The room tensed as the name hung in the air, a stark reminder of the man at the center of the trial. Diddy had built an empire not just through music and media, but through relationships with powerful figures across industries, billionaires, investors, and international moguls who operated in the shadows. These were the people who funded the parties, backed the ventures, and ensured that the system remained intact. "They didn't just throw parties," Kutcher said. "They built companies around them." What Kutcher described was not a chaotic underground network, but a well-organized infrastructure designed to sustain itself through secrecy and compliance. It was a system that rewarded loyalty, punished dissent, and ensured that anyone who tried to step outside its boundaries would be met with swift and silent retribution. The more Kutcher spoke, the more it became clear that this was not just about one man or one set of events, it was about an entire ecosystem of influence, one that had thrived for years without scrutiny. And now, thanks to his testimony, the mask was beginning to slip. As Kutcher's testimony unfolded, the courtroom bore witness to a disturbing reality: the cost of silence was not just personal, but deeply institutionalized. The more he spoke, the clearer it became that staying quiet was not a choice, but a necessity for survival. "I wasn't just scared for my career," he admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "I was scared for my family." The weight of those words lingered in the air, a stark contrast to the jovial, fearless persona Kutcher had once projected to the world. The man who had once played the fearless prankster in films was now the one living in fear, haunted by the consequences of his silence. The threats he described were not always overt or violent. More often than not, they were subtle, insidious, and carried out through economic and social pressure. Kutcher recounted how, after he attempted to distance himself from the inner circle, 3 major business deals collapsed seemingly overnight. There were no emails, no official cancellations, just an eerie silence. "One week, everything was fine," he said. "The next, it was like I never existed." The message was clear: if he wanted to protect his family and his future, he had to remain silent. Then came the phone call from a mutual friend, a trusted confidant who had once been part of the same world. "You made someone nervous," the friend had told him. That was all. No explanation, no justification, just a warning wrapped in casual phrasing. But Kutcher understood the implication immediately. He wasn't just being watched anymore, he was being targeted. The system had already demonstrated its reach and power. If he continued to speak out, the consequences would be far worse than lost business deals. After that call, he said, "I knew I had to make a decision. Either I walked away completely, or I stayed quiet and let it all continue." Kutcher's fear was not unfounded. He described how, in the years that followed, every attempt he made to distance himself from the system was met with resistance. Projects he had invested in suddenly disappeared. Invitations to high-profile events ceased. Even his digital presence was manipulated, social media accounts were hacked, leaked, or mysteriously suspended. "It wasn't just about me," he said. "It was about sending a message to anyone else who might consider speaking out." The message was loud and clear: silence was the only path to safety. Yet, despite the overwhelming pressure to stay quiet, Kutcher found himself unable to live with the weight of his complicity. The fear of losing his career and family paled in comparison to the guilt of knowing what he had done, and what he had failed to do. "I kept telling myself I was just protecting my name," he admitted. "But I was helping them bury the truth." The realization hit him like a tidal wave. He had spent years managing optics, running distraction campaigns, and drowning out the noise with good press and red carpet appearances. All the while, he had been complicit in a system that silenced victims and protected abusers. As the courtroom absorbed the full extent of his fears and the consequences of his silence, it became clear that Kutcher was not just testifying against Diddy, he was testifying against an entire structure of power, one that had thrived on fear, control, and complicity. And now, for the first time, that structure was beginning to crack. As the trial progressed, the courtroom became a stage for revelations that transcended the legal proceedings. Kutcher's testimony had already shattered illusions, but one moment would prove to be the defining turning point in the case. It was the moment when he finally spoke of the most chilling warning he had ever received, the one that forced him to confront the full weight of his complicity. The incident occurred in early 2017, a time when Kutcher had already begun to pull away from the inner circle. He had distanced himself from certain projects, stopped attending specific events, and started to reconsider the alliances he had long maintained. But his attempts at separation were met with a response that made it clear: exiting the system was not as simple as deciding to walk away. One evening, a call came from a burner phone. The voice on the other end was calm, almost conversational, but the message was unmistakably ominous. "You know too much," the caller said. "Get out." Kutcher froze. The words were short, direct, and devoid of any emotional inflection, but their meaning was crystal clear. This was not a suggestion. It was a command. The caller was not asking him to leave, they were telling him that if he continued down this path, the consequences would be severe. It was the first time Kutcher had heard such a direct threat, and it sent a chill through him. Until that moment, he had always assumed that the pressure would come in the form of lost opportunities or professional setbacks. But now, he realized, it was something far more dangerous. The warning was not just about his career, it was about his life. The caller was not a stranger, nor was it someone acting independently. This was a message from within the system, a signal that Kutcher had gone too far. He was no longer just an observer or a passive participant. He was a liability. And liabilities were dealt with in ways that rarely made headlines. In the days that followed, Kutcher found himself constantly looking over his shoulder. He noticed strange patterns, cars parked outside his home for hours at a time, unfamiliar faces lingering near his office, messages disappearing from his inbox before he could read them. The paranoia set in, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was coming. The warning had been clear, but it had also been a test. Would he listen? Would he disappear? Or would he keep digging until the entire system crumbled beneath the weight of its own secrets?